I'm Jakub. I am really excited to be here. It's my first R-related conference. And I'm going to talk about Moodle and Moodler. And so what I do at the university, I do my PhD, but that's actually not related to this. What I also do is that I work for an e-learning office. And e-learning office is a student-run center that takes care of our university's e-learning platform, which is Moodle. And we do basically usually some admin stuff. We make sure it works. We communicate with teachers. We advise them how to do things. But we are also interested in how we can use Moodle for research and how to sort of capitalize on the fact that Moodle has a good database and a lot of functionality that you can take advantage of. So a little bit about Moodle. If you don't know Moodle, you probably know other e-learning platforms like coursER or edX. It's basically a place where you can put stuff that students can find. They can interact with each other there. They can create content. There are pretty traditional things you can do there as well, like doing quizzes, marking them, things like that. Teachers can follow progress of students. There's a history of what they do. And it's structured around the idea of context. So you have different contexts, like a course is a context, and within that context you can have certain roles and permissions. So if you're a student, you have a student role, allows you to do some stuff, interact with certain parts of it. If you're a teacher, you have different sets of permissions, allows you to do different things. And it's a very modular environment, so you can build courses and learning programs from like a small modular pieces, and you can go to quite a fine detail at who can do what at what point and which piece. It's been around for quite a while. I think first public version of Moodle was 2001, if I'm not mistaken. And the project is spearheaded by Moodle HQ, which is an Australia-based company. And it's an open source project, so you can modify it. There's quite a vibrant community that provides plugins. Like most of the functionality of Moodle comes from plugins, so that's where the community can contribute. And Moodle is big, I think, at least in two ways. So one way is how much it is used. It's really, really popular. There's a very large amount of the sites that opted to register for sort of a survey that Moodle HQ does that basically looks at how many institutions run Moodle. And these numbers are quite impressive. And there's many, many more websites that did not bother to actually register for this survey, so the numbers will be much higher. There's also kind of a commercial version of Moodle with a handful of additional features. And those also do not enter here, even though that version is very popular and many institutions, NGOs, governments, universities are using that. There's also quite a good network of so-called Moodle partners, which are companies to whom you can pay to take care of your Moodle. They can host it, they can make sure it's updated and so on. Do some custom development, right? So that's one way in which it's big. It's really, really popular. But maybe the more important way in which it is big is it's community-driven. So currently there is 1,358 plugins for Moodle. And as I mentioned, plugins is where most of the functionality of Moodle is, from 767 different developers. I think that's quite impressive, and it's a bit like R. R is also, if you have R with no extra packages, you would have a tool, but it would not be nearly as big as it is today. So there is quite a big and vibrant community. So the way it works is that you have basically web server that's running PHP, and that sits on top of a database and a file storage. And file storage is not very interesting. That's just where people can upload files. But the database is really interesting because it stores a lot of very interesting information. So there are some examples of what it can store. So one thing it can store is basically access to pages. So it looks at what URL you were visiting, and it just stores it as a log. So it's quite a traditional way of looking at the activity of people at a web page. But given that a lot of content is actually being created in the page itself, and by content I don't only mean that somebody is like writing a document or something, but also there's lots of interaction happening. There is discussion forums where people write posts. There is interaction between students and teachers where they exchange comments. When people are creating like glossaries or other materials that they can do, others can comment on it. There's quite a lot of information that stores directly in the database. And so discussion forums is another example. So there's obviously a text of the post, but also who posted it, whom he was replying, and so on. Another large part of the database are quizzes. So quizzes stores all the data related to questions, all the text, all the answers, and so on. But also how is the quiz set up, and what marks are for individual questions, and what modes the quizzes are in. There's quite a lot of room for what you can do with quizzes. And all that is in the database. And of course, timestamps for everything. So if I submit my answer in the quiz, that will get timestamped, and there's a very detailed information of what was I exactly doing in the quiz. So all this data, I think, are a very good target for data analysis if you want to do educational data analysis. So one reason why I think Moodle is the good target for this is obviously the way it's popular, but also there's quite a lot of activity towards that goal of analyzing the data. So the sort of current way of doing it is there are some plugins that you can install that allow you to sort of watch and observe and sort of access certain metrics. So you would install a plugin, and it would tell you how much students access your page, how much they access the materials that you put there, and so on. What usually these plugins do with that information, they are kind of focused on like interest and attrition. So how to spot that students are losing interest in your course, and then you can do some sort of intervention, like you can contact them. And that's like, these two things are obviously useful. They are useful especially for like companies that teach mostly online, like Open University in UK. But it's also kind of limited, and the fact that something is a plugin means that you have sort of one modular thing that you use, and you have there's no big freedom with what you can do with it. It's a self-contained unit. That's good for some users, like teachers who just want to click and have results, but not very good if you want to do some more creative stuff with the data. And of course, most of these things are PHP and not R, which itself is, I think, a disadvantage. So I think it would be very useful if we want to sort of progress in this direction of educational analytics, and we want to use Moodle to do that, if there was an easy way to get the data out of Moodle and use it in R. And there are kind of two things that you need to do. First, you have to access database of Moodle directly. There are some ways to get the data out of Moodle without doing that. Like you can go to a quiz page and you can like download CSV or something, but I think that's a very, very bad way of doing things, especially if you want to do more stuff at once. It's very difficult to automate. So that's one thing. So you have to access the database directly, and that's also a bit difficult because of how sort of complex the database can be. So you know, it's not only you have to know SQL, but you have to have some knowledge of the quirks of the database and where the information is stored. That's quite a lot of detective work involved. And then you need to decide once you get the data out of there, what's going to be your output. Because it can be one specific thing that you need at that moment, so you write the specific queries to get that data, and then you do your specific data wrangling in R. But maybe with the latest sort of trends in how we seem to love tidy data frames and some other standardized data structures, we can sort of move towards that rather than have very specific narrow things. Yeah, so this is to show you some ways how you can do that with Moodler. So I'm going to show you just 2 examples of how you can get data from Moodle database. And this is actually 2 use cases that we encountered in the past, because I needed some quiz-related data to do item analysis, because that's what teachers want. That they wanted to assess knowledge courses, how they work. And we also needed, we wanted to do some like interaction graphing of discussion forums. So that's what I'm going to show you. So the first thing that you need is actually to connect to a database. So that bit can be a bit more complex than I'm showing here, because if you don't know DBI and RMySQL, I'm just creating a database connection object in this way. If you are connecting to like remote database, you might need things like SSL certificates, or you might need this to be like running on our server, to the same server that Moodle is running on. So they're both behind the same firewall, so that's the security bit taken care of. But here I made my life really easy. So I have a local instance of Moodle. I don't care about security at all. And I also do some settings because I was too lazy to set up the database properly. Now we can load the Moodler package. And we can do some exploration of the database. So one thing we can do is to view the courses that we have. So we have some course names. We have some course IDs. We can use that information to get more specific data from the database. These IDs are the same IDs that you would use, that you would see when you are on the actual Moodle page. In your URL, that's the ID that you work with in Moodler. I think that's quite useful because it allows you to sort of, if a teacher sends you a link URL to their course and wants to do stuff with it, you can just take that from the email and you can use this here. So next thing I'm going to do is I pull the list of all modules that are within a course. So I'm using the course ID and I'm saying what modules I want to fetch. So we can look at this. And this is the list of all the forums. So you have the forum ID, you have the name of the forum, and that allows you to sort of pick, like, maybe you want to do some batch operation, like download more of them or something like that. So having done that, you can pick a forum. In this case, I'm going to pick this one. And I can download sort of some basic data. And if I do that, it's going to print some information about the name of the forum and also the ID and the course ID, last modified, and how many posts are in there in the forum. So this is some print method, but actually it's quite a simple list with a data frame. So if you want to work with that, you can use that. So the next thing I'm going to do is to fetch the actual posts. So the idea of the workflow is that you have this forum object, and this forum object allows you to do stuff. So you can download a lot of them, look, for instance, how many posts are there, and then decide, okay, I'll only want those that have at least 100 posts, for instance. And then you can download the actual post data for only those forums. So in this case, I'm going to do it for this forum. Some problem. Do it again. Oh yeah, so it sort of prints some information about how many posts and word count. And again, it's a simple list with posts like this. It contains the text of the post. It's probably better if I show it like this. The time where it was posted, and so on. So you can already use that if you want to do like textual analysis or something like that. But we can also do is graph that, and for that you need edges and nodes, and there is really like easy functions to get that. So you just run those, and now you can use iGraph, for instance, to graph those. And then you have a plot of a forum. And so that's really the point of the package. So you have something you want to do, like displaying a forum, and the amount of code that you need to write in order to get the data that you need is actually really small. It's just this and this. So the point is that this is really comfortable way to get the data out of Moodle for the things that you actually want to do. I have another example, but there's no time for this. So maybe I will just stop here, and if you have questions, you can ask questions. So the question was if you can write to the database. If you have the permissions, you can do that. That's not really the sort of point of the package, but you can use DBI and RMySQL, and you can actually write into the database as well, yeah. So this is tested on 2.9 and 3.2. I don't think there should be many changes in like the database structure. There's going to be some, but at least in those two versions, it should work. Okay, thanks.